was there a moment where you felt maybe perhaps your view of automation completely changed or fundamentally changed?
A lot of things that we did, needed human intervention at every step. Then I saw there is a platform which could automate 20-30% of the processes. Generative AI came into the mix over the last 2 or 3 years. The whole world of agentic AI came into play, and now our customers are actually reporting more than 70-80% of processes that can be automated.
Welcome to Discover Dialogues podcast, powered by TechDogs. The world of business and technology is evolving at breakneck speed. AI breakthroughs, digital transformation, and game-changing innovations are reshaping industries every day. On this show, we dive into the trends, ideas, and strategies driving the future. We're sitting down with industry leaders, innovators, and disruptors to bring you fresh insights, bold perspectives, and real conversations that matter. So plug in, tune in, and let's discover what's next.
Today on the show, we're joined by Dominic Pereira, Vice President of Product Management at Automation Anywhere. With over 2 decades in enterprise SaaS, Dominic's journey spans BPM platforms, governance and risk systems at MetricStream, and now agentic process automation at scale. He currently leads agentic process orchestration, helping enterprises move beyond task automation toward adaptive AI-driven systems. In this episode, he shares why measurable outcomes matter more than feature velocity, what companies underestimate about agentic AI, and why governance must be built in from day one. Let's dive in. Welcome to another episode of TechDogs Discover Dialogues. Dominic, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Likewise, Vikram, looking forward to this discussion.
So, Dominic, before we get into agentic AI, the whole enterprise scale orchestration that we're, seeing now, I think it's also important to understand, the journey that shaped your perspectives. Obviously, you worked across multiple waves of enterprise technology, and almost, you kind of built on each of them. And also there's been that evolution that's happened over, across enterprise systems in that, couple of decades that you worked, right? So, would love for you to kind of walk us through that professional journey of yours, that path that led to where you are today.
Absolutely, Vikram. So I started building out core BPM platforms like Skelter, which was taken over by Snyder, and SmartApp. Now, what those tech platforms did is give me a good, strong grounding in how technology is designed and scaled. Because that was a generation when we were scaling technology, building SaaS products. But when I moved into business applications at MetricStream, which is in the space of governance, risk, and compliance, that got me closer to the end users, to the end business users. That's when I realized technology isn't just about building capabilities or features. It's about driving measurable business outcomes. I would say that journey shaped how I think about innovation, because I've got a mix of tech and business applications. So today at MetricStream, I bring together that strong platform thinking and the domain to build out our agentic process automation platform. And now I know what we're building is not just technically powerful, but it has to also deliver real outcomes across HR, finance, supply chain, and beyond. Now, with my experience in governance and risk, we always build things with a security first, trust first mindset. Now, that basically shapes whatever I do at MetricStream, and now even at Automation Anywhere.
And when you look back, was there a moment where you felt maybe perhaps your view of automation completely changed or fundamentally changed?
Yeah. So when we worked at MetricStream, a lot of things that we did, needed human intervention at every step, right? So at that point, we were trying to build platforms that we knew a lot of steps that could be automated by themselves, right? So when I came at MetricStream, when I came at Automation Anywhere, then I saw there is a platform which could automate 20-30% of the processes. And as generative AI came into the mix over the last 2 or 3 years, what we've seen is the kinds of things that customers could do has expanded from that 30-40% to around 70-80%. Because there were several steps where you needed some kind of a cognitive ability to think and take action. And that's when the whole world of agentic AI came into play. And now our customers are actually reporting more than 70-80% of processes that can be automated.
And if you had to describe that one, maybe perhaps the mindset shift that kind of prepared you for this phase of your career, what would it be?
No, I think it's building things which have measurable business outcomes. I think all the tech in the world is great. We can build the most scalable platform, build the best tech out there. But if you don't really build things that end up with measurable business outcomes, it does not really serve a problem. You reverse the thing where you basically building a solution, looking for a problem. But when you turn things around and there are specific things you're going to build, and then you look back and say these are the different technologies I need to put in place to achieve that specific business use case or outcome, I think that's when magic happens.
No, and this is very interesting, actually fascinating as well, because I think every facet, kind of every or your career for that matter, kind of connects to things that we aren't really obvious in many ways at first. But I think your background kind of sets the context for what we want to talk about next. And that's what's happening in automation right now, right? Obviously, organizations are no longer just automating the repetitive tasks. I think they're trying to build, an adaptive, intelligent system. And then when you kind of look at that shift happening, I think there's a new layer of complexity operationally that many perhaps enterprises are trying to figure out. And you've kind of been at the deep end of enabling low code and citizen development environments, which kind of actually accelerate innovation inside companies. And how can platforms ensure quality and consistency as so many more users build automation tools?
And that's a great question, Vikram. Before I get into the citizen development itself, we believe that the process owners or process experts or SMEs in the companies, they know the process better than anyone else. So there was this wave, I think many years ago, saying, we can only have that many professional developers. Why don't we build tech that allows the citizen automators to actually build out these automations, at least build like medium to complex automations? When we started the journey, we looked at what are the things that would, what would enable our citizen developers to roll this out across the board, right? First, we felt you need to build a guardrail should be built in. Governance cannot come as an afterthought, right? That was the first thing we thought. Things like RBAC, what is it that citizen developers can do? Because organizations deal with a lot of sensitive systems. You do not want citizen developers to go and build a lot of spaghetti code, which results in a lot of technical debt. Second, how do I make it lower the barrier of entry? Standardized building blocks like templates, reusable components, conversational assistants that are grounded on best practices. Like today at Automation Anywhere, you can just write a simple prompt, describe a process, and that would create an outline of an automation for you. Now, when I'm creating that outline, that's already grounded on the best practices on the right way to build automations. So we're trying to reduce the number of failure points by going this approach, by going this route. Now, when I bring these two layers along with observability, because along with lowering the barrier of entry and setting the right guardrails, you want to also ensure you're keeping a watch on what's getting built, how it's working, the failure points, so that you can make the right interventions. In our view, if you don't really keep a tab on what's happening, you end up building a lot of technical debt. I think by building these three layers, we are able to help our customers roll this out across all their, say, citizen automators. And one of our large customers has close to like 3,000 users or employees building automations, and they've actually classified them very, very beautifully into green belt, yellow belt, and red belt. And they call the professional developers red belts, but they're basically incentivizing everyone to go and automate their own processes. And we see that playing out pretty well for our customers.
No, and one of the things I definitely want to touch upon on what you said was that, when you're trying to build these systems, you want to make sure that first is compliance is something. But at the same time, you're not trying to introduce, fragility. What you're trying to do is you're trying to encourage creativity, just like your client did, right? How do you build something like this, or how do you do something like this?
Yeah, so I think like it goes back to the providing the right governance, because when IT wants to roll it out, they want a sense of comfort that it's in safe hands, and they've given them the limited ability to build those things out. At the same time, like I said, if you have the right AI tools to give them grounded, automations, at least based on the best practices that the organization has built, that that reduces a lot of error rates and also the acceptance across the organization to roll this out further. Right? So I think these are things that has helped our customers. Now, with citizen dev, the other aspect that also comes in is it's not just a technology play. There is also a program play because the organization also have to incentivize the employees to actually build it out because this is not their day job. Like at the organization, I gave an example which have 3,000 citizen automators. They've incentivized them. It's part of their KRA to actually go build this out. And that's how, you get far more better adoption across the organization.
And to add to all of what we're trying to do in terms of automating processes, Gen AI has actually introduced another level of complexity. And I think there's a lot of talk. There's an India AI summit that's also happening in another couple of days. A lot of companies today are experimenting with Gen AI, but they are struggling to operationalize it. In your opinion, what helps bridge that gap between, real world deployments and just pilots that they're doing?
Yeah. So I think what we've seen is, see, the POCs, they demonstrate, I would say, isolated capabilities. But when you really want to take something to production, that needs systemic operational design, right? And we basically look at like three structural pillars to enable, I would say, successful operationalization. One is an outcome-driven architecture, right? Now, the whole shift your focus from automating tasks to transforming an end-to-end business outcome. Because when you do a POC, you do it for a specific use case or a specific task. You can, it works and you feel good about it. But when you really put it in an end-to-end business process, that's where we see a lot of customers not doing well, right? So we look at, shifting the focus from actually automating specific tasks to transforming an end-to-end business outcome. With the proper reasoning as a foundation, because that's when you're bringing the think or the cognitive part of it. Second, we also encourage to bring a human in the loop by design. Because human judgment is an architectural necessity. It also enables confidence, scalability in regulated mission-critical workflows. Because you want a human in the loop whenever there's a final approval, whenever there's an exception, right? Because that's when we see organization accepting Gen AI far more than others. And the last piece for us is also using governance as an accelerant, because governance embedded from design time basically builds trust within the organization, reduces the risk, and also helps you in fast-tracking your production deployment. Right? So we basically look at that from these three pillars, and we've seen our customers very successful using this model.
If you go back, say about 4 months back or maybe 5 months back, there was this entire discussion around agentic AI, and how agentic automation, is going to introduce this new collaboration between systems, agents, APIs, and obviously it's not just task automation anymore, right? Now, and then we are now in 2026. A couple of months have passed, and we are still trying to figure out, the complexity of agentic automation. And I'm sure there are a lot of enterprises also are trying to figure out that complexity. And and do organizations underestimate the operational complexity? Is that the case, or how would you describe it?
Yeah, so I think there are many things that have changed compared to how things worked, say, 2-3 years ago, to your point, right? First is like variability. Coming from an automation industry, traditional automation was very deterministic. It was rules-based. There was a set of rules, you could test it, and it worked. But agentic systems now reason and adapt, which means outputs can be. And that's a big change when it comes to looking at these aspects, right? And this requires things like guardrails, constraints, and the right level of validation layers, including a human in the loop. I think the second big change is accountability. When say like an agent makes a decision, like who owns the decision? You need some level of auditability, traceability, right? Clear logs is what was the input, what is the reasoning path, and what is the action taken. Third, I would say, is the integration complexity. Agents, as like I gave an example in the POCs, they're not really valuable in isolation. They must interact securely with all your enterprise systems, whether it's ERP, CRM, ITSMs. And then at the same time, they also have to respect those compliance boundaries, right? So that becomes the third dimension. And the last one, which I feel is probably often underestimated, is the organizational readiness. Because for an organization to succeed, they need to rethink roles, skills, and the work design as a cultural shift, and not just a technology rollout. Because the way we've done things for the last 20 years is fundamentally changed with generative AI. Because this whole aspects of variability, accountability, which is not in the mix in the past.
And actually, then my next question was going to be more about, and you've kind of talked about it a little, but maybe perhaps we double click on it, right? When enterprises are trying to introduce agentic systems and, they need to build some sort of a capability or that capability perhaps must exist before they take on, this endeavor. What capabilities do you think should exist?
This is basically so when I really look at you're saying capabilities, Vikram, within teams or
within the business, within the processes, maybe within the architectural flows. I mean, what I'm hinting towards is even before an enterprise takes on, this whole piece saying that, listen, we're going to introduce agentic systems, into our workflows. There's something that needs to exist, right? Before you can't just say, okay, let's start with agentic systems now.
I think it's at least I would look at it from a leadership level. When I'm looking at the teams, I think we are making fundamental shifts, I would say, in multiple fronts. One, we're looking at system thinking over just feature building, right? Just building features. So now you're not just shipping, I would say, a static capability. You're deploying a system that learns, adapts, and influences behavior at scale, right? So as a leader, I would say, we're looking at this new world. We're looking at feedback loops, like second and third order effects, and also cross-functional interdependencies. These are things we were not thinking through. It was not really a necessity in the past, right? The second thing is also the way we are judged. We also have to judge under ambiguity because AI kind of operates in a gray zones. There's rarely a clear right answer. So I think this is where, as a leader, I would basically look at how do I balance innovation versus risk and also make principled trade-offs with incomplete information. You're not going to get, because when I started my journey, you had to be absolutely sure on what you're going to get done and how it's going to get done. But now we have to make those trade-offs with, say, incomplete information and also know when to slow down, because there was a phase when we were like organizations were just introducing AI agents. I think we need to be very thoughtful on where we're going to introduce AI agents and also differentiate where it makes sense to have just an automation and where to have an agent, right? Because it's not that you just replace everything with an AI agent. That's not the goal. So this really isn't being like risk averse, I would say, but it's about being risk aware and accountable. And there are other aspects, Vikram, things like, ethical foresight, accountability. You can't just say this is what the model did this, so I don't take responsibility, right? So we need to have leaders, I would say, define clear boundaries for acceptable like system behavior, set up right governance and monitoring mechanisms. So you basically own the outcomes even if they're unattended, right? So these are a few, I would say, shift that we see across the industry. Like as the last one for product managers, I think also fluency, to collaborate across different teams. Now we have engineering, data science, UX. I think these are three teams we've always worked with. But now we have to work with legal, security, and policy and other departments, which we traditionally would not work in, right? Because when I'm dealing with AI, there is a lot of PII data that gets in. We need to make sure legal is involved. I think that's the big change that I see with modern product leaders. They need that fluency to bridge the gap between all of these different departments and make sure we get that right solution out to our customers.
Do you think that, perhaps maybe judgment is going to become more important than the velocity when you're doing AI in product environments?
Absolutely. I think one new skill I think all of us have to learn is the ability to say no, because it's not that you like in the past. I would say like a couple of years ago, we used to get a lot of requests that they want to get AI agent introduced, right? So the first thing is thoughtfully introducing them. Even from a technology, I would say as product leaders, we need to say no at some point because getting it right is more important than building X number of features. So definitely, I think that will come into play.
And would love to ask. I'm sure there are habits that you personally to stay clear-headed, when you're involved in projects like these and the stakes are very high? Would love to know a little bit of those.
Yeah, I think, see, there are a few things I was practicing in the past, like things like getting things done. There were specific targets that we were doing. But I think now we're relooking or redefining the whole definition of done, right? So it's no more about shipping on time and looking at adoption metrics. Here we're looking at, as we're building things and releasing things on time and tracking, I would say, the adoption targets, we're also looking at observability and monitoring. We're defining failure modes. We're looking at clear escalation paths. These, and if you don't operationalize this, responsibility will never happen, right? So these are things I would say are becoming all the more important. I know several years ago, way before GenAI came into mix, I was trying to experiment with this concept called pre-mortems, right? We always do post-mortems. Everyone's pretty excited about it. I started this in my previous organization. I remember doing it in the first two projects at Automation Anywhere. When you start a project, look at it and say, what are the things that could potentially go wrong, right? And what happens if it goes wrong? Like, can the system, today we have to ask questions like, can the system be misused, right? Can bias emerge? That was something we never thought about. What happens when the system scales to 10 times the expected growth, right? So this whole mindset of doing a pre-mortem, understanding what could potentially go wrong before even starting a project. I remember trying this out when I just joined Automation Anywhere for the first two projects. It really gave us a good set of insights. But that was like a very nice thing to do. But today I think we have to do it because we have to understand all those dimensions. So these are a few things I would say, I'm rethinking the way I build things. Also incentivizing me and my teams on long-term thinking. It's not just delivering something for the immediate future, but look at the outcomes that will be delivered in a more longer time frame. So these are a few things that I've been doing, or I think will be important for us, as we get into the world of Gen AI. And I think one probably last thought is also making the consequences visible. If things go wrong, do a detailed analysis, keep it out there in the open. Right? If there are near misses, use that as a learning, curve, so that you can actually use that learnings and build the next system out. I think these are a few set of things I would say are important as we go along.
No, almost like what I'm hearing you saying, that reflection, is something that you have to do, and perhaps allow it to maybe overshadow velocity in many ways.
Absolutely.
And I know, fantastic. I think that's a very powerful statement right there. And given this context, I'm sure in your position when you're driving teams, obviously you're trying to help them think beyond just the feature delivery, or you're also obviously, like you said, the pre-mortem thing, right? So you're trying to figure out the systemic consequences that could come before or after. How do you guide teams?
Yeah. So again, I would go back to those two or three things. First, I'm trying to encourage teams to get into system thinking over feature thinking. So that's, for me, is very important, because getting a set of features out is one thing, but looking at it as a system, because when you do a system thinking, you're basically looking at not just shipping a static capability, but now we're deploying something that learns, adapts, and influences the behavior at scale, right? Unlike in the past, you had a very well-defined capability and it did exactly what it was supposed to do. But now we're putting something far more powerful out there. So the whole thought process changes a lot. And at least as leaders, we are asking teams to look at the second, third order impacts, looking at how does it impact the overall organization than a specific capability. I'll go back to the judgment and the ambiguity. I think all our teams will have to, and myself have to learn, how do we actually take a decision with probably less than 100% information, right? You need to make those principal trade-offs with incomplete information, because that is not something we used to. We would look at data, if you look at a typical design thinking, you diverge, look at different options, converge, find the best solution, get there. But you may not have all the answers. You may have incomplete information. So I think training the teams to get there is important. And along with that, it's no more a capability that you just put out there, but you also have to look at the ethical aspects of it, right? Make sure biases don't creep in. How do you ground the data using the right service, right? Correct service, so you give them as much accurate information, at the same time have a human in the loop. I felt that's another important thing. And the one that I also shared earlier is also this building this new muscle to start working with security, privacy teams, legal teams. That cannot come as an afterthought, because that's something we learned over the last 2 or 3 years. We built everything, and then we used to go to legal and say, "Oh, I built this, tell me if you're okay." And they say, "No, they should shoot it down." So, how do you engage with legal, compliance, security teams ahead of the curve, so you can get the right guidance before you build things out, right? Because today in this new world, when you're dealing with PII data and sensitive data, getting their inputs upfront is critical, I would say.
So, you mentioned feature thinking, and you're wanting teams to move into into system thinking. Do you think there's also a way for design thinking, to be incorporated in some way, given that we're dealing in a lot of AI-driven products?
I think that, for a product manager, I would say they should be doing design thinking all along. It just becomes we're just dealing with many more variables, because as I'm being trained as a design thinking, so I've been doing this all my life. But now it's just the number of variables are
Right.
different. Because if you look at a typical design thinking cycle, you would go look at all the possible ways you could solve something, then converge and look at cost benefit analysis, and then do a look at technical feasibility and decide. But now it goes beyond that, right? So this will just give you the top 3 ways to solve it, but you need to look at what's right for the customer, look at other aspects of how do you take a decision with things like incomplete information. So I think some of those aspects will still play out when it comes to this.
And and again, maybe I'm just veering off a little, but it just come to my mind. When you have customer feedback, coming in continuously, and the systems are also continuously learning, how does that come together?
Yeah, no, I think we are in this phase where the change is happening almost every day. We're getting new things happening every day. So the way we are actually approaching it is we're getting at least the strategic customers be part of the process of building the whole feature capability out. We moved away from a phase where something is generally available, you ship it to the customer, and then they get to see it. We have a lot of customers who are part of the process early on during design phase. They have early access to a preview versions, and you see that trend across the industry, where they're testing out early versions for specific use cases, because the number of things you could potentially do with generative AI is infinite, right? We cannot solve all the problems. We have a sweet spot on what we're trying to solve. So working with our customers early on, making their feedback before we roll it out, that's one big step we've taken, and we've seen a lot of good results with that.
Great. And now that we've kind of explored, enterprise automation, we've talked about the complexity around agentic systems, and almost the judgments that we have, the role of judgment, perhaps, in all of that. Well, I would love to shift gears a little. Would love to kind of get to know the person behind the platform, behind the tech. Coming up next is our rapid fire round. Would love for you to be completely instinctive, short questions, of course, from my side. Whatever comes to your mind, first, just let me know when you're ready. We'll go for it.
Okay, absolutely.
All right. One word that describes your weekend mood.
I don't have my guitar right now in the background. I took it out for the meeting, but music.
Oh, nice. What's your go-to comfort food?
I'm a biryani guy, so biryani anywhere in Bangalore.
Oh, nice. A song that you would never skip, given the fact that I'm assuming you're a musician as well.
No, I think it's Uptown Funk, Bruno Mars. I listen to it all the time, so that's my it's my motivational song. So whenever I'm down, that's the song I always listen to.
What's your idea of a perfect evening?
I think I have a dog. I've got a lovely English golden retriever,
nice.
Casper. So I think spending time with him and my daughters and my family, I think that's my
Perfect.
weekend. That's my routine.
Great. One thing that you've been curious about lately.
So I'm basically a tech guy. So I think this whole I would say I'm super excited about this whole world of autonomous agents in everyday life, though I build a lot of enterprise things. So I'm looking at different things that I could do in my personal life. So that's something I'm exploring a lot. So I'm trying different things out.
One word your friends would use for you.
I would say that's it. I'm just wondering what to say.
How they describe you as well? Maybe if that will.
I think they would describe me as someone who's very chilled out.
Nice. That's always a good sign and a good description. All right. So a hobby that you secretly wish you were better at or you want to pick up.
No, I think with music, I started off, but I would definitely want to spend a lot more time because that's something I definitely want to pursue and spend a lot more time on.
A place that helps you reset.
I'm from Goa, so
Yeah.
it's Goa.
Totally nails it. We don't have to say anything. All right, Dominic, it's been a real pleasure having you with us today. Thank you for joining us and sharing us your insights. Any parting thoughts?
No, I think first, thanks a lot, Vikram, for having me on the show. Really enjoyed the conversation. I think we're moving into this new world of agentic process automation, and we definitely believe in the promise on what it can deliver. And we're just looking at different opportunities to help our customers get that 10x benefit. At the same time, do it responsibly and do it with the right set of guardrails. So I think that's definitely something that I'm looking forward to.
Fantastic. Dominic, thank you so much once again for joining us. Really appreciate this.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe on YouTube, Instagram, or your favorite podcast app. Catch past episodes and more at techdogs.com. See you next time.